What's up guys, Rogue9 here. Those of you who took part in Simmer's survey a few weeks ago will remember that there was a question that I haven't covered yet. The question was, which side do you feel you win more on or do better at? Attacker, defender, or unsure? Now if you haven't thought about this before, maybe take a few moments to think about it for yourself. Which side do you feel more comfortable on, and which one do you think you win more at? In the meantime, the format for this video will be as last time. First I will briefly present the results of the survey, and then back with me to discuss the results are Koros, Get Flanked, Gregor and Prodigio Pete. At the time that I evaluated the results of the survey, there had been 1,298 respondents, and in terms of the attack versus defense question, the results were as follows. 36% of the respondents felt more comfortable and more successful as attackers, 50.6% as defenders, and 13.4% were unsure or felt just about equally comfortable. Interestingly, these results were pretty much the same across all of the player skill levels, so whether a player was copper or all the way up to diamond, always about half felt they preferred defending, and about a third or just over a third preferred attacking. So with that, over to you guys. What are your personal thoughts on attacking versus defending, and what do you think of these results?
I would have expected most people to feel comfortable defending. Personally, I quite like attacking because you've got ACOGs, and obviously when you get used to one, when you have to switch out the ACOG, as you know, Jaeger and Bandit don't have ACOG now, and you have to put on, say, the red dot or the hollow, you actually get a completely different sensitivity to get used to.
Yeah.
So now I actually kind of like attacking more than defending.
It's different muscle memory.
Yeah, completely different. You have to sort of relearn it. But
the one thing I would say is with the research that I did, in season 3 attackers won more, and season 2 defenders won more. So I don't know if that changes how you look at that at all, or if you were aware of that. But I attributed it to ACOG removal of Bandit, Jaeger, and Smokes being buffed. But yeah, I think a lot of people, I think that's different than what I was expecting. I never dreamt in the trap meta that defenders weren't winning the majority of the rounds, whether it be in Pro League or in ranked. I think it's probably different in ranked, but I could be wrong.
I wouldn't have either.
The thing defending is all the pressure's on the attackers, really. And, you know, if you're solo queuing, a lot of people, there are base plans that most people know. So, I don't know, let's go for something really obvious. Consular, you're attacking the garage, you want a Thermite, you want a Thatcher. So people know that base stuff, but if you're attacking different objectives, you might not get the operators you need on attack, and that can make a really big difference. But on defense, I think it's less important. That's not to say that some operators are really key, you know, like Smoke or Mirror, but on attack, it can really be make or break right from the start.
How do you guys feel, like, depending on the game mode? Because I definitely have different thoughts on it. Like, depending if I'm on secure area, I feel more comfortable on attack, because I think secure area is a lot more frag heavy, and you know, bomb and hostage are a little bit more strategic for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't think I played hostage for ages.
I'm one of the weird people who actually quite enjoys hostage. I don't know. It's definitely the less played mode. I don't think I've seen it in any of the Pro League matches. They always play bomb. That's the main game mode there. Yeah, but I think bomb is the most competitive mode, you know, personally.
Yeah, it gives you the most variation in how you can go about it.
Yeah,
I think looking at attack and defense, the one thing that I would say to the people who feel very strongly that they would rather be on defense than attack, to me, the most overpowered thing in the entire game is the drone. And if you are really struggling as an attacker, in my opinion, that's a really strong indication that you might not be droning well or enough.
That's the first thing that I always give people advice on. Yeah.
Attackers, in my opinion, have the stronger gadgets. They have the more lethal gadgets, I would say. They have the more lethal gadgets, and they have the better weapons and the ACOGs. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, the game is kind of set up to favor an attacker. But you're right. I mean, what Pete said rings true no matter what. Even if I drone somebody out, I still have to do something in order to kill them as an attacker. Whereas, you know, the defender, you know, doesn't have that weight on their shoulders.
The attacker has to make the first move. They have to. If two people, just like sit in a room and wait for somebody else to move and just let the clock go down, then that's just how it works.
Do you think these perceptions match actual win-loss ratios, sort of on attack and defense side?
I think it's really close. I remember seeing a couple of polls or some data collection a couple of seasons ago that defense was just a tiny bit higher at really high competitive level play, like something like a 51 to 49% difference. But to me, that's sort of like chess, right? Where white has that same sort of like first move advantage. That's very, very tiny if you're taking two people at the same competitive level. But I think it's one of those things where it's so close that
if you wanted a perfectly balanced game, I think 1% is within the margin of error.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do.
I would pay a lot of money for Ubisoft just to come out and say this is the win percentage at gold, silver, bronze, platinum, diamond, and pro league. If they open up the GoFundMe for that, I'm the first person to donate because I would love to see it. I've done some research of my own on pro league, but that doesn't translate. I mean, it doesn't. What the pros are doing does not.
It's on a completely different level.
To be honest, I would prefer in this game that defenders win more, because I feel like you should always have a slight advantage being on defense because you are holding down a point rather than attacking it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always think defense should be able to win more often than attack.
But wouldn't that advantage you, just thinking now, if you got defense first round?
It definitely would, yeah.
So that's like, I think they do actively try to get it as close to 50-50 as possible.
Yeah, I think they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are a lot of elements in the game that they do to try to counterbalance that. Like defenders can pick the site, but they can only win on it once. And so there's sort of this interesting. I personally think there aren't any shooters like it that really do the same kind of thing. This idea of having like different sites on a map that are inherently weaker or stronger than others in terms of what the defenders would probably prefer. And there's a really interesting kind of meta game that goes back and forth. Every game of Siege tells a story. There's a very clear kind of early game and a late game aspect to it, and that's what makes a competitive game a competitive game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But nerf Ella, please. Please.
Right. I've always that's what blew my mind with the introduction of Ella, and I hate to keep going back to her, but I've always kind of had the impression that it's easier to win on defense, and when they introduced Ella, I was like, why? We don't need this. We need something as an attacker. But I think introducing Ella might not have been as big of buff to the defenders as taking away ACOG from Bandit and Jaeger was a nerf to defenders.
Well, it's funny because the general consensus, I think, at higher ranked play is that, and I think this is really true, that if you're not getting kills with Jaeger's ACOG, then you're not going to get them with the red dot or the hollow. And people who are already really good at using the ACOG aren't going to stop playing Jaeger just because of that, because he's still 3-speed and he's still a very strong character, and the weapon itself is still really good. But it is that one little thing. Very small changes can have a very profound impact on the metagame for a game like this. That's just how it works.
Yeah, if I had control of it, I would take the ACOG off all the defenders. I like the idea of them all being more close combat. Rather than any kind of range combat from a defender. I don't like the idea that they're waiting for the attackers to get in, then take them down.
And there's only really two. If you look at the data here, then if you're going off of that alone, then there's only two quote meta operators that really take advantage of the ACOG on defense, and that's Rook and Doc.
Yeah,
I think that limits the competitive capacity of the game a lot. Which is why I was talking about maybe have different weapon classes that can use different attachments.
I think the ACOG is such an advantage over everything else in the game that I agree with you, Core. I'd at least like to see how it would play out, because in certain situations, an ACOG against a reflex is no comparison whatsoever. That ACOG is going to have a hands down advantage. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see a TTS where they took ACOGs away from all defenders. That would be really cool to me.
I think that Ubisoft's maybe underestimating the capacity that they have to make, kind of perceived big changes to the game just for the sake of experimentation and kind of like put it in the players' hands and see what they think of it. What you mentioned there with like taking away ACOGs from defenders, I'm sure there would be a lot of people complaining. I'm sure there'd be a lot of Doc and Rook mains just
doesn't matter what you do.
Absolutely livid. Right. Well, that's that kind of leading into my point there is that with a game like this, it's already like really difficult to make a change, like take away ACOG from Jaeger. But I think there's a certain point at which UB just kind of has to like sit down and go, okay, here's the data, let's consult it and just make this change, for the sake of the numbers. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the numbers.
And according to your poll there, I mean, Rogue, that's it, I mean, you almost have to say good job, Ubi. The way they have it set up right now is as close as you're going to get it according to your poll. I mean, yeah, you do have a large portion there that's unsure, but the fact that only it didn't even reach 51% say that they prefer defending, to me means that it's pretty well balanced right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think in terms of the last point you were making, sort of in terms of the making changes, we've seen it happen with the recoil, something you'd think shouldn't really be such a huge difference. I mean, at the moment we have random recoil that can go up by a random amount within a certain bracket and left and right within a random amount for each gun. And the suggestion just to sort of standardize that and allow players who will dedicate themselves to learning the recoil for certain weapons to allow them to do well with them. The amount of backlash that's created was surprising to me, and you'd think any other drastic change, they'd either have to... No, they wouldn't even be able to sneak it in. They'll have to just very gradually, stage by stage, get people used to it, because otherwise you'd have a mutiny.
The backlash would be too big, yeah. Well, this is the thing about any kind of like random variables. I never really like saw the recoil, like the randomness of the recoil in the game as a significant problem, because I always kind of treated it like this. A pretty good example that I can think of the top of my head was what they did with Halo Reach when they transitioned from Halo 3 to Halo Reach. In Halo 3, all of the aiming in that game was 100% skill based, and where you aimed the reticule on your screen, that was where the bullet went. And the skill-based aspect to a certain degree in Halo 3 was that there was bullet time and weapons weren't hit scan. And you, at certain ranges, you kind of had to like lead your shots a little bit. When Halo Reach came out, they still had that aspect with the DMR, which was supposed to replace the battle rifle as the quid pro quo skill cannon of the game, like the base gun that you had to like, you play CSGO, you gotta learn how to use the AK. And in Halo, you had to learn the battle rifle. And in Reach, you had to learn the DMR. And a lot of people gave the DMR backlash because they implemented reticule bloom. And this whole concept of reticule bloom was where you had this circle where the bullets would go. But as you fired more shots, the bloom would get higher and higher, and the aiming would get less precise. The problem that occurred there when it came to getting headshots with the DMR, there was a certain range, at about like medium-based range, where if you just spam fired the trigger instead of controlling your shots, you were actually at a statistical advantage to win that particular gunfight if you just spam fired the trigger, because there might be a bullet that would go to the head.
Get the winning lottery ticket.
Exactly. And in Siege, that problem I don't think is as pronounced, just because of the one headshot mechanic. A one-shot headshot mechanic that already exists in the game to begin with, and certain guns certainly have different kinds of like recoil patterns that they will generally kind of fire anyway. But in a game of poker, that's a game of chance, right? There's going to be that occasional game that just won't really work out for somebody. They can do everything right and they'll just get unlucky. The point is that they're able to play consistently over the course of a long period of time and do better than others. That's just kind of how the numbers line up. In Siege, I think that there is still a very clear disparity between people who can control their shots. And sometimes, yeah, they get a little unlucky with the recoil. Sometimes they get a little bit lucky with the recoil. But it's never really been like that big of an issue to me, personally, from like a competitive standpoint. I think there needs to be recoil in a game like Siege, because you're dealing with a tactical shooter and you're dealing with guns, and guns are loud and they're it's really hard to control. Some are harder to control than others. You need to have a certain aspect of difference between different gun classes, I think, and there needs to be some kind of caveat to engaging people at range. I don't think that an Ela main should be able to like go out at medium range and be able to duke it out with people with assault rifles just because the person went into a training room and, you know, practiced the recoil pattern like a cajillion times to the point where they can just get every single shot on track.
I disagree completely right there. Like the whole recoil uproar is honestly, like, I love the Rainbow Six Siege community. I'm so happy to be a part of it, but that's the most disappointed I've ever been in this community, because why not make the game as skill-based as possible? Right now the recoil is random, which means that you're going to have random gunfights, which means that this time your aim might be great and you might do exactly what you need to get the kill, but the next time that might not happen. So if the time that it works for you is in the first round, but the time that it doesn't work for you is in a 4v4 overtime match, those are two different situations, and I want to take that out. And I cannot believe that, in my opinion, if you go into a custom game and you practice the recoil to learn it and learn how to manage it, and you get to the point where you spend hours doing it and get to the point where you can be a laser with it, good for you, well done, and you deserve it.
Right.
I mean, so right now the alternative is that maybe one time my recoil is going to kick up and give me a headshot, and the next time it's going to kick to the left and I'm going to miss completely. I would take 9 times out of 10. I'm going to take the situation where I can go and learn the recoil over the randomness.
I don't think the problem is that pronounced. I think that the round-based system that the game already has is enough to counterbalance that sort of variability. But I don't necessarily disagree with the logic.
I'm kind of in favor of predictable recoil, so I guess we're flanked here. I'd like to think the reason the community weren't mad keen on it is because when you hop on that TTS, I don't know if you guys recall, but some of the recoil was kind of silly looking, you know? And I'd like to think that people just looked at that and said, that is ridiculous. Having these sort of 4 styles repeated across every weapon. Whereas I think when we heard that this predictable recoil was coming into the game, a lot of us felt, because weapons at the moment, they're not truly random. I mean, if you go and fire...
that was my point.
Yeah, Buck C8 against the wall 10 times, it's not going to look similar to Ash's R4C. Like, there is a general pattern to how Buck's assault rifle fires. And I think what people thought it would be like an average of every time Buck fires his weapon, and that would just now be the constant every time he fires it.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, you got this weird S shape, and I think people just thought, that's kind of silly. So I am in favour of the predictable recoil, but I just want it implemented in a way where the weapons feel similar to how they feel at the moment, apart from those ones that need tweaking, like I think Bucks probably does, and maybe Capital's Para 308, I think it is. They need tweaking or whatever, but I think to just completely change it, I think that is probably what upset a lot of people.
Well, I think that ARs for the attackers should have an inherent advantage at range, because that just makes sense. And submachine guns should require, I think, defenders to get a little bit closer in order to get the most out of them. I think that if you did do a predictable recoil system, you could implement a predictable... I mean, well, Counter-Strike's a good example of that, right? I think that there is enough in that game to warrant the usage of assault rifles over submachine guns. It's a bit of an awkward comparison because the meta for Counter-Strike is considerably different than how Siege is set up at the same time. So it's a very difficult problem to tackle. But what I would do is give the ARs a little bit less spacing in terms of the patterns that they used, and give the SMGs just a tiny bit more, just so that if there is someone who is able to, you know, go into that training lobby with the submachine gun and be able to compete at long range with it, good for you. You've done something that's more difficult than somebody else with their assault rifle at that range. But that's just my stance on it. I think there needs to be very clear advantages and disadvantages to, you know, the different operators and different weapon types, personally.
I just want, whenever I get into a gunfight and I lose, I want it to be 100% because that dude did a better job than me. And I don't want it to be because my gun kicked right this time and the last time it kicked left. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I want it to be skill-based.
Don't get me wrong. Like, there have been plenty of instances where I'll be... like, someone will try to do, like, a run out on me from the outside. Like, they'll just do something like run out on the balcony at this predetermined moment. And I get, like, a couple of shots into them, but because of the way that they were firing. And they'll just spray wildly, but because the gun happened to like kick in a certain way, they get a headshot off of me and then I die. That's annoying.
I've benefited from that a lot. You know, I'll be honest. I hold my hands up.
Absolutely.
I've shot sort of near someone's head. I've even had it where I've reviewed it, and my reticule wasn't on the guy's head, but I've still had the headshot. So
yeah,
it goes both ways. And I think that visual thing is part of the problem. It was a member of the community that identified that there was this visual recoil.
Yeah. I honestly, if they're gonna do one thing, where the reticule is being pointed, at which point the bullet is coming out of the gun, that's just where it should go.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing they really need to fix.
Because that's jarring, you know.
Because that just does to me, like someone who's, you know, like a really like logic based person, that just doesn't make sense, you know. But it is a video game at the same time.
I probably will when they actually implement it, but yeah, I'm not expecting zigzags and shit.
That is.
I mean, whatever
point,
happens
really.
to the game, I'll be fine with it, you know, because I like the game too much. I just hope that UB, you know, makes the best decision based off of the numbers that they have.
They have said that he's going to be on the TTS,
and it should
in different in different guises, that they're not going to push it out, and I trust them to put these different versions on the TTS and for us to give them the feedback that they need. But then it's on us as a community to make sure that this feedback that we're giving them isn't just, you know, reactionary and
I know a lot of people, you know, sometimes you know, people will come into my comments and they'll talk about how I give Ubisoft too much crap. What really is disproportionate there is that I only make videos really and complain about stuff when bad things happen to a game, I guess, and I don't necessarily talk as much whenever good stuff happens, because it's not as entertaining to go, wow, good job. You know, people like people to get mad, right? But I really do think that Ubisoft is doing a good job with the game, especially when you consider that they've mainly been a single player company for a very, very long time. I always kind of joke about how Siege sort of became accidentally popular for a company that mainly does single player kinds of games, and now they're just sort of like, oh crap, you're like, what do we do? But game balance, especially at a competitive level for a competitive FPS, is really, really difficult, especially considering that, and I'm not trying to sound elitist, you know, people have opinions about a lot of things on the internet, and they're not all necessarily based off of facts. Sometimes people just get mad about stuff, and it's not necessarily based in a fair, argumentative stance. But as long as they do enough internal testing, then I'm not necessarily going to complain, unless I see something that I think is just really ridiculous.
Yeah, I think a great example was when Jackal's ability came out, and everyone was just like, oh, he's going to be overpowered. And
it's so OP!
Like, it's like, just wait till it's in the game and then see what it's like.
I kind of thought the same thing about Dokubi's camera hacking thing, because I saw that, and she even kills Valkyrie in the debut video that they did for her, and I was just like, oh my goodness, all the Valkyrie mains are just done. And in a sense, once someone dies and once Dokubi gets into the cameras, yeah, if Valkyrie places her cameras incorrectly, then it becomes a liability to the team to a certain extent. But it's still counterable. There's still things that the player can do to mitigate the negative effects of that.
Yeah, and I think it's good that every operator have some sort of counter.
Yeah, but like you said, if you're conscious of that fact that the camera can be hacked, you need to then just, as Valkyrie, place the cameras where they are useful to the team, but where you're not giving away team members that you know will be operating in certain areas. And I think something else that is probably beneficial to that ability is it also means that you need to be more careful as a roamer, because now it's not just your own life at stake, your own ability to contribute to the game, but if you get isolated and caught out, if you're playing too risky, you're the one who's going to end up harming the team. I quite like that aspect.
Yeah.
Valkyrie didn't have a counter before. I mean, you can say that IQ is a counter, kind of. I mean, she could locate the cameras. If she wasn't in the same room, she couldn't do anything about them. Twitch, if she saw him, she can destroy him. But in my opinion, Valkyrie needed a hard counter, and I'm really glad that Dokubi kind of fills that role. I like that aspect of Dokubi.
Yeah, I had a game today when I was outside the building and I kept getting spotted and I was IQ and I could not for the life of me find the Valkyrie camera.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm just glad that Dokebi isn't another 3-speed with a fast firing rate AR, and I think that was a really deliberate decision that they made with her gun choices, especially to kind of counterbalance that.
Yeah, initially I was very sad to see no assault rifle, but like I love playing her. She's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, she is really fun. I'm a very support based kind of player, and she fits in that role really well.
Excellent, good. I think we've sort of drifted off topic a little bit. If there's anything else related to either sort of the rankings or the player choice in terms of defending or attacking, otherwise I'd say that was a lot of useful stuff, and thanks a lot for joining in.
Yeah, glad we could.
No problem.
Glad I could be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rogue. Thanks for having this really interesting conversation. Great to hear the perspectives of all you guys. I really appreciate it and enjoy all your guys' perspectives.
And there you have it, attack versus defense discussed. What are your thoughts on playing on either of the teams? Leave your comments in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this podcast-style roundtable discussion, we're actually making it into a bit of a series, and there are several previous episodes you'll be able to watch already. The link in the top left-hand corner now will take you to a playlist where you can catch up. Links to all of the other guys' channels in the description. And with that, guys, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next episode.